And
That's amazing.
none of the tellers were able to answer it though. But the weird thing is, my ex used to, because it was basically her bank that I used to have to go in, because basically she wanted me to pay money into her account like every 2 weeks. But she'd refer to it as terrorizing the Santander staff. Terrorizing? Sorry, asking them a simple question about the banking system, which they should be privy to since they work in it, but they're not paid to know. And that's the thing. Being an activist for this sort of thing has, certainly to me, it's presented a lot of barriers for my personal relationship. I've started to realize that the kind of people who I would be compatible with are definitely not those corporate cocksuckers.
Yeah.
Not the kind of people who actually take pride, and and that's one fallacy that I've been trying to enlighten people about recently. People say, "Oh, I'm proud to be British." I'm like, all right, well, what part did you have in being born here? What say did you have in being born? I mean, you know what pride means, right? You know what it means to be proud about something. How can you attribute pride as an adjective for where you had no part in the decision to happen? And people just like, oh, fuck off, mate, sort of thing. But certainly with the notion of moving away from the idea of personal property, I'd say that possibly lends a little hand into the idea of considering our partners as personal property, because that's how we're conditioned to act in our current society. We think of our girlfriends or our wives or our husbands or our boyfriends, whatever. We consider them as our property, and we react in a parallel fashion if our ownership of them, or our supposed ownership of them, were to be threatened. We have the arguments, that's my wife or that's my girlfriend, sort of thing. And that's one thing that me personally, I'm starting to move away from the consideration of becoming jealous whenever, whenever my ex used to flirt with someone or anything like that would happen. I would not get jealous, and that would actually piss her off a bit, and I'd just explain to her, well, look, there's no point in me being jealous about this sort of thing. I don't own you. You don't own me. We're together in some arrangement, but, why should that be something that we need to get in a twist about? And it's those kinds of things that, we should consider our intimate relationships as something where we can be the most honest about, I think. And obviously the train of thought that we do advocate, it does capitalize a lot on being honest about who you are, what you're doing, even sometimes how you're feeling. And obviously, as we've discussed, that can rub people up the wrong way. So is there any advice that we could offer to any budding activists for the Zeitgeist Movement who may find themselves in the situation where they're having arguments with their girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife or whichever, and that, the involvement with the movement is causing some friction? I mean, would we have any advice from being well-seasoned activists? Would we have any advice on that front?
Well, first of all, if you're a man, please try to remember that even if you're right, you're still wrong. It's the golden rule, Adam. You know it. You know it.
I know it, but I've always resisted against it, but,
You know it's true. Come on. You don't need a bloody scientific study to tell you this, mate. You know what? Fascinating topic. I can't say I've got my thumb on this one yet. I know that this love thing would be redefined as extensionality in a sane world, and I like that, because coming back to what you're saying, it's not about ownership. It's that you meet someone with extensional values. You stand a better chance of getting along for the sake of getting along and being with each other for the sake of being with each other. Because you're bound to enjoy each other's company more. It isn't rocket science. But, the ownership thing. What's right? Polygamy, monogamist? What's the right type of relationship benchmark for human behavior, for human interaction? Human beings have a huge, wide-ranging birth of different social standards with regards to sexual behavior and marriage and relationships. I can't say that I know what the optimal one is, but I do know it's got something to do with extensionality in a very, very big way. And if you're not extensional anymore, then this is the thing I'm struggling with. Do you work through your differences? If you're having problems, like people say, you've got to work at it. And I'm like, yeah, okay, you've got to work at it as long as you land at somewhere happier. But eventually, if you're not happy, why would you still be together? That's what I can't wrap my head around, because people just say, well, marriage is for life. You're supposed to be together for life, or whatever it is, or, the benchmark of how successful your relationship is how long it lasted. I just don't understand that.
Yeah, I think that's...
You could be in a relationship for 30 years, and for 25 of them, the old man or the woman, for that matter, it can happen, beat the shit out of the other person. And it's just like, well, how the hell was that a decent marriage? Well, they stayed together. Yeah.
That's the thing that, that I've realized, that as my interest in this train of thought and transition of my values, as it were, has progressed, I've realized that I've outgrown certain people. And, unfortunately for some of my previous relationships, I've outgrown them. And that's one of the things that my last two relationships, previously in my life, whenever a relationship has ended, I've been in tears. Before, when I was a teenager, I used to cut myself. I used to be emo before emo existed. But no, my last two relationships, when they ended, not a single tear shed. And I personally, I actually see that as a progression in my values, to think to myself, yeah, it's ended. Deal with it, move on, sort of thing. Even if she can't, that's her lookout. But me personally, I'm evolving in that sense, to not be completely torn up about something that I have no control over anymore.
There's only one caveat, I suppose, to that, is the use of the word outgrow could easily be misinterpreted as
yeah, it can be, yeah,
as aloofness or arrogance, which we do sometimes come across as through our respect for a reasonably intellectual dialogue, or not see, even that sounded arrogant. Through a certain use of stuffy old posh language. How about that? Yeah. Right, so we sound like a bunch of egotistical pricks sometimes. I think that's worth mentioning. Just by the way, as a side note, I would prefer to outgrow, I would say, lack of extensionality would be more appropriate, Adam. Because it's not that there's a more or less developed state. It's just it's a different one.
Yeah.
I suppose there is a more or less developed state in terms of your reaction to the world in a real sense, a physical sense, which is, I would say, a better barometer of intelligence. But in terms of just bouncing back to relationships, the first relationship, withstanding myself sounding too narcissistic, is a relationship with yourself. So there's a very good line in one of my old band's tracks, which I've always like to remind myself of, which is in a song called Outcast by my old band. I'll just plug it, called Shell Shock.
Very, very good band, actually. Very good sound.
Thank you, Adam. And it's a song called Outcast, where one of the lines says, "Don't you realise, heed the call, you will spend the greatest part of your life alone." The idea being that no one has to spend more time with you than you.
So you better actually, grow to accept yourself.
It's not a case of thinking the sun shines out of your arse, but You are okay in your own skin and you have your interests. And what people do is they like certain attributes of some other person and they try and fit themselves to the model of what that person wants them to be.
Mm.
And they change themselves unequivocally from what they used to be. You see people do this all the time. You know, your mate was really spot on and top banana, and then, like, he gets involved with the chick and he never calls you anymore. And he's, you know, before long he's reciting, like, Shakespearean sonnets and love poems, and you think, oh, what the fuck happened to you? You know? And you know, he changes. And you don't know whether he's changed because he wants to, or he changed because he has that yearning for the need for a partner in his life, which is fine, but they have to have something to do with your value system. They have to have something to do with where you're at, you know?
Absolutely.
I know there's compromises that have to happen in a relationship, and that's to be expected, but there has to be a line in the sand. You can't be going and oh yeah, baby, I won't go out 2 times a week to play football, you know, because it's my main passion in life, because you want me to stay in and, I don't know, massage your back. No, go out and play football. Of course there's a compromise. Well, are we in a relationship? Because Friday night you go out with your mates down the pub, you know, and that's not your passion. You'd obviously just prefer not to be with me. If you don't want to be with me, just say.
Yeah.
You know, but so actually, I suppose that's what I'm trying to drive at. That the great thing, actually, just to say, Matt and Rachel I stayed with in Vancouver are a couple. Their idea of a good night in is to sit down of an evening and watch a John McMurtry lecture or an Alfie Kohn one. You know, or a documentary.
You sound like my kind of people.
Yeah, and that's their idea of a good night in, or that, you know, they'll sit down and watch something that stimulates their minds and what have you, and they have a good laugh and they have a good banter together, but there is a point of extensionality there. They have a very similar worldview. They challenge each other about it. They have proper discussions where they challenge each other and they bounce it off. And you just think to yourself that that's a healthy relationship. There's a level of extensionality there where one's not asking the other, saying, well, I have these views. This is what I like to talk about. This is what I'm passionate about. And, you know, and you're not. Well, then that's not a relationship that's really that healthy, is going to inspire too much happiness, or is destined for too much else other than not lasting, I would say.
Mm. Yeah, I'd say that's probably all the time we've actually got now for this show.
Oh, damn.
That's all right. Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, we'll definitely have to pick this up for another show, because I can definitely sense we've probably got another maybe 4 hours.
Underestimating there, Adam, underestimating.
Well, it was brilliant to have you on again, dude. I definitely love to have you on again.
Real pleasure. I really enjoyed it. The time flies.
Yeah, it definitely does. Definitely does. But yeah, that's the show for now, ladies and gentlemen. And just as another reminder, tonight, which is the 5th of August 2012, is going to be the 2nd annual Zeitgeist Media Festival, the main event in Los Angeles. For those of you who can't make it, the live feed for it is going to be on stickam.com/Zeitgeist Media Festival. As for the next show, I'm going to be compiling some of the most challenging discussions I've had about this from discussion forums or Facebook statuses or things like that. I'm going to be compiling a series of them and just reading these responses, but that's that. Anyway, thank you very much for coming on, James. And it's very goodbye from me, and say goodbye, James.
Goodbye, James.